In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to get the DayZ Workbench working for scripting, hot loading, so you can load and edit your mods in real time without having to shut down the server in game to recompile your scripts. And I'll give you some template files to easily and quickly get started with all of this so that you can get modding with the official DayZ modding tools. There's a lot to learn with this. I'll try to keep this as basic as possible, and in future videos we'll build on the information. Okay, so let me walk you through this. I have a README file here which is included in my ZenTemplate folder on my GitHub. Don't panic, there's a lot of instructions here, but they're all really simple steps. I just really laid them out in a micromanagement way to make it very obvious and clear what to do with each step. So the first thing I recommend doing is reading the Bohemia documentation on the basics of DayZ modding and the basics of the workbench. Read through these. What I'll show you today will do all of this. There are some mistakes in this wiki, so I don't recommend following it word for word. Just follow my guide, but I do recommend reading through this so you get a basic understanding of how this all works, or how it should work. Now, if you install DayZ and DayZ tools to a different directory than the default, you will have some extra steps you need to do. I recommend when you're setting up DayZ tools to just do everything with the default settings. It makes everything a lot easier when you're following guides and documentation, and there's a lot less that can go wrong when your file paths all match the default settings. So unless you have a very good reason to change them and you know what you're doing, I recommend leaving everything as the default, including your P drive letter. Leave it as the default if you can. So first things first, you need to install DayZ tools and the DayZ server from Steam. If you don't see these in your list, then make sure tools is ticked on this drop down box here. Once you've installed those, you need to launch the tools, come to settings and make sure this is ticked. And as I said, keep all of this as the default if at all possible. Once that's done, you can quickly open up the Addon builder. And if you come to my README, you can copy this list of included files and go to options and paste it in the top here. This will ensure that when you pack your mod, every file that I can think of that has not been automatically included will be. If you don't have any of these files in your project, it won't make any difference. But if you do, then they won't be left out when you pack your mod. Now, preparation. There's a bunch of steps here. It's really simple. Make sure your P drive is mounted. So if you launch DayZ tools, that will automatically launch the P drive. Now we need to run the workbench. So click this button here. If you've got DayZ experimental installed, this pop-up will happen. Just ignore it. Now, if you're using a 4K or even 1440p monitor and your interface looks like this with teeny tiny icons and everything is tiny, I'll show you a quick tip you can do to improve the interface. So I'm on a 4K monitor. What I need to do is come to my DayZ tools folder. So that'll be in your Steam Commons folder. So wherever you installed DayZ and DayZ tools to, go to the common folder, DayZ tools, bin, workbench, right click workbench app and go properties, go to compatibility, click on change high DPI settings, click override high DPI scaling and change this to system enhanced. Click OK and apply. And now when I boot up the workbench, it'll be much easier to read. The catch is it's a little bit blurry, so you kind of have to get used to it not looking as crisp as everything else on your screen, but it's much, much better. So what we need to do while we're in the workbench is come to workbench options and make sure this is set to your project drive, your P drive. If you change the letter, make sure to change it here. But again, I recommend leaving it as the default if you can. And that's it. We can close out of that. That's the first two steps done. So now the next step is to copy and paste the mpmissions folder from your DayZ server folder into your DayZ games root folder. So if you don't know where your DayZ root folder is, just come to Steam, go properties on DayZ, go installed files and browse. This is your DayZ root folder. And what we need to do is go back one folder, go into the DayZ server folder and copy mpmissions into the DayZ root folder. Done. This contains all of the config for each map, vanilla map. So your types, item spawning, zombie spawning, etc. Once we've done that, we can now download and copy my ZenTemplate folder somewhere convenient and easy to find. And we need to do a few things. So if you come to my GitHub, go to repositories and find my template, or you can just type in the link that's in the README. We need to come to code, download zip. Once that's downloaded, we can open this up, and you need to extract this folder. Now I recommend not putting this on your P drive because there are some files in here that can cause the Workbench to have a bit of a SPAC attack. So just copy this into something like your documents folder. I'll paste mine in here. And now what we can do is come into here. Actually, I'll rename it to get rid of main. We'll open it up, and there's some batch files in here that we can run to set everything up. So the very first thing we'll do is come into Workbench setup, and we'll run this batch file first. This warning will pop up. You can ignore it. You can always check the source code to the batch file if you want to. It's a bit complicated, but all it does is cycle through all the files in this folder and rename them based on what you put into these prompts. So the common directory is your Steam apps common directory. If you haven't changed it from the default, you can just hit enter, and that will use this default file path here. Same for your P drive. If you haven't changed your P drive, don't put anything in. If you did, put the letter in there. I didn't change anything, so I can hit enter, and we're done. That has now renamed all of my batch files to have the correct file path to everything that is required. All right, so now that that's done, we can delete this run first batch file, and we can copy these folders to where they need to go. So P drive, I can copy these contents onto my P drive and just paste it straight into the root directory. And then for my game root folder, I can copy all of these files and go into my game root folder. So I can paste those in there. Now, if it says to replace files with the same name, that's fine. That's overriding some mpmission stuff. So just click replace. And if you're wondering what it did, it just replaced the globals file so that you log in within 3 seconds instead of 15 seconds. And it also added the single player offline mode init.c from the Bohemia documentation, this stuff here. So now that's all done for you. You don't have to set all that up. So that's all these steps done so far. The final step is to link our scripts folder to the game's root directory. So that's really easy. I had a file in here that I copied over. Don't run this in the template folder. We need to go to my game's root folder up here, Steam Common DayZ, and run link scripts, this file here. So double click that. As long as you've seen this junction created, then we're good. We're done. And we can delete this batch file now. And you never have to do that again until you wipe your computer or uninstall DayZ. So that's done. Now we're done with this Workbench folder. If you copied the game root folder contents to the game directory and the P drive to your P drive, we can now come out and just delete that folder out of your template. We have prepared the Workbench to work with our mods. The next phase is setting up our mod folder. So there's a few steps here, but again, they're simple. What we need to do is come to our template folder in my documents, copy that folder, go to my P drive and paste it in here. Now I can rename this to something. I'll call it my first mod. And we can open this up, and we need to run this rename.bat. Again, it will warn you that it's not verified. It's just going to rename all the files in here. See, if I cancel and open this up, you can see all these files have ZenTemplate in the file paths. This batch file will rename all of that and all the folders, everything that mentions ZenTemplate to whatever you put in here. So my new mod name needs to match the folder. So it'll be my first mod, hit enter, and we're done. Now if I open this up again, it's all changed to whatever I put in there, including image sets, and anything that has a file path has been updated to whatever we put in that batch file. So now if we're on our P drive, and this is our mod folder, we can delete rename.bat. You can delete readme as well. And this is the beginnings of your mod. So we've done step one. We copied the folder over to our P drive. We ran the rename batch file and renamed everything. The next step is to navigate to our DayZ game directory and run the link mod batch file. This will enable hot loading. So hot loading is the ability to recompile our scripts while the game and the server is still running without having to close out of the game and relaunch everything. Now this feature doesn't work with every change we make to our mods. Some of the more major changes won't work, but I'll show you some examples of what will work later on. So let's go back to my P drive. And I recommend creating shortcuts to these folders. So if you navigate to your Steam Commons folder and right click DayZ, you can create a shortcut, cut that shortcut and just put it in your P drive's root directory. And then you can just jump into your game folder and P drive really easily and quickly. Or just put a shortcut to your common folder. So now we need to go to our game folder. If you copied all of these files out of my ZenTemplate folder into the root directory, then you should have this file. And this is all we need to do is double click this and type in our mod name. So that was my first mod. Hit enter, we're done. That has now created a symbolic link to our P drive in the game's root directory. And we can now run our scripts as if it's a mod, as if it's a packed mod. And so that when we edit our scripts, we can hot load it into the game using the workbench. So if we double click this, it should take us to our mods root folder, and it does. So we're good to go. So there's a couple of other steps here. This one's optional, but I'm going to pack this mod just to make sure it works. So we'll go to pack mod, my first mod. And if you copied over my P drive contents, you should have a couple of folders in here called packed mods and dependencies. If we go into packed mods, first of all, this should go in your packed mod folder when you publish it to the Steam Workshop. This creates some in-game description of your mod. If you want to do that, you can delete the README out of here as well. So what we need to do here is type in my mod name and then also include the add-ons folder on the end. So now I can click pack, and this should pack a loadable mod from my template into this folder. Don't rename this folder because all the batch files depend on it. So what we can do now, if I come into here, we should have our PBO in there, perfect. So now if we go back out to our P drive, to begin editing our mod in the workbench with hot loading enabled and all of that, we can double click this batch file here and type in the name of our mod. So mine is my first mod. And these batch files will remember the last mod you worked on so that you don't have to type this in every time. Again, I can click OK on this, ignore that. I can't figure out how to get rid of this warning. This is DayZ data is a DayZ vanilla game file, so I don't know why the workbench doesn't automatically load this in, but I haven't noticed any issues with my modding, so I think you can safely ignore that. If I figure out how to get the vanilla game files to load into the workbench's dependencies, I'll let you guys know. But for now, we are in the workbench, and we should be able to, if everything worked properly and we've followed every step so far to the letter, we should be able to come to editors, script editor, and minimize some of these folders. And under 3 game, we should have this folder, my first mod. So in 3 game, 4 world, and 5 mission, we have my first mod. So now let's open up my first mod, entities, man base, and player base. And what I can type in here is modded class player base. And we can follow the tutorial here where we print something to the console when the player jumps. So here we can say override void on jump start. And here we can say super.onJump start. Always remember to call super. And now we can say print. I'll just say subscribe to the channel and save that. Now let's go back to our P drive and go to our game's root directory. If you copied all these batch files over, we can now use these to jump into the game. So what I'll do is right click these and click create shortcut and cut all these shortcuts into my P drive. And I'm not going to be using offline mode very much at all in my modding, so I can delete them. And we have a packed version and a hot load version. So the packed version will load whatever I've packed to this folder here using the add-on builder. So this is great for testing your mod before you publish it to the workshop. The hot load version will load directly from my mod folder, the scripts. That's why we had to set up this symbolic link. So this will tell the game that our code sits here, and when we update it, it will update in the game as well. Before we continue, I'll just show you really quickly what these batch files look like. Let's have a quick look at the run server. So all of this is just to set and save the last mod we used. This is where we start the server, this line of code here. So we start the server from this file path. My setup batch file would have renamed this to whatever you put in at the beginning. We run the diag version of DayZ. This is the diagnostic debug version of DayZ. And we set our mod list here. So this is important. This is our mod name. You can, of course, get rid of all of this if you want to, and just set your mod name up in here like that. I also have a list of dependencies here. These are mod dependencies. Now, for some reason, I couldn't get these to load directly out of the game root folder. I have to put them on my P drive. So if we go to workshop, this is where all my DayZ mods are. If you can't see this folder, make sure to change your file explorer options, go to view and turn on show hidden files, folders and drives. If we go into here in our root game directory, these are all the mods I have installed. I need community framework, and I use VPP admin tools as my admin tool. So I can copy those two mods, go to my P drive, go into dependencies and just paste them in here. So this is my P drive, dependencies folder, and then the mod folder name. We also have file patching turned on. That's what enables the hot loading. And we have our server config folder here as well. So let me undo all those changes. And before we continue, let me show you a quick look at our DayZ config. So if we open this up, all we need to do in order to get this to work as a test server is turn BattleEye off, verify signatures off, and allow file patching. If you want to change the map you're running, you can do that down here as well under template, but that's all that file does. And so our batch file just simply runs the server diag version of the server with that config file loaded and our dependency mods. So just a couple of things to mention. With this link mod batch file, this is optional. You don't have to do this to get your mod to load up in the workbench and with code completion and all of that. This is only necessary if you want to be able to hot load and recompile the mod while the game is running. So you can skip this step if you don't plan to do that, but it's so easy you might as well just do it. It just creates this little link here. You can always delete it if you don't want it. And if you need it back, just add it back in. And as for the running the packed version, it's identical to the other version, except we're loading our packed PBO instead of the P drive mod folder, source folder directly, if that makes sense. So this version just runs the packed PBO, so you need to pack your mod before this will update the code. The P source directory one depends on your mod being symbolically linked in the root DayZ folder in order for this version to work. There are pros and cons to both versions, which we'll go over in future videos, but just wanted to make that clear. The way I've traditionally modded is using the packed PBO and constantly repacking the mod. The new workbench method with hot loading and symbolic linking, we can just use the source folder, which is cool. So now if I run server debug hotload and type in my name, my first mod, that will boot up the server with this mod folder file patched. So now I can move that away. And we can also join the server. So join server debug hotload. Double click that. And I can just hit enter because that's saved the last mod I worked with. Just hit enter. And now we should boot up into the game running my first mod. And while that loads, I just want to explain as well with the run workbench, if your mod depends on a different mod as well to load, just like I showed you with the running the server. So running the server, we run our server with our mod and with the dependencies, community framework, and VPP admin tools. You can do the same thing with the workbench. When you run the workbench, you pass in your mod you're working on and the dependencies that you need in order for your mod to compile. But anyway, let's go back to the game. This should load in a second. Okay, the game has booted up. Let's go back to the workbench here, the script editor. And we can click on debug here and go to debug client or debug server. And the print log down here, if you can't see this, go to Windows Output. You can actually detach this window and move it around. So I can move this onto my second monitor if I want to. And what we should see now when we jump in game is this text print to our log here. So let's have a quick look in game. Jump. Subscribe to the channel. Perfect. So pretty cool stuff. Let's do one last thing before I wrap up. Let's come to 5 mission, my first mod. We'll open up the mission server. And here on init, I'm going to create a timer that will repeat. So here I'll say get game.get call queue, and we'll use call category system, and we will call later, and this function takes several parameters. The first one is a function, so I'll say debug print, and then the second parameter is a millisecond delay, so we'll do 5,000 milliseconds, and the third parameter is whether or not to repeat, so I'll say true. This will call the function debug print every 5 seconds indefinitely. So down here I'll create a new function called debug print, and in this function we will print a server message that says game tick, and then we'll go get game dot get time, and that'll do for now. Let's save that script. Let's come up to build, and let's actually debug and go recompile file on host. That remote recompilation was successful. Let's go debug and then click server. And now this isn't going to work because on init has already been called. So what I need to do is restart the server. If I'd done this in a function that hadn't already been called and would get called again, then this code would actually execute on the server even without shutting down the server. But for now I need to restart the server to get on init to trigger again. So let's do that really quick. Run server debug hotload, enter. We can clear this. Oh, you can see there, game tick, it's working. So let's clear this log and check this out. What I can now do is say, I'll move this down a bit. I can add subscribe to the channel, save that code and come up to debug, recompile file on host, and watch this window. Boom. So our print message has been updated in real time while the server is running. So you can obviously see the power of this debugging method, debugging technique when you're working on your mods. Now this won't work on everything. It's a bit limited on what it will work on, but for things like printing to the console, pretty valuable. So that'll do it for this video. We'll go into more detail about the workbench in future videos, and as I get more familiar with the different tools and plugins, and Dab has a fantastic framework that is linked to GitHub and all of that. I'd love to get that working. If I ever get that working, I'll do a video on that. But for now, this is a great way to get started with the workbench. You can even see this is calling Get RPC Manager is a community framework function. So we even get code completion for the dependency mods that we've added. So actually I should update the README to mention the dependencies. So that's it. I'll wrap this up here. The files for all this are on my GitHub, links below. Good luck with your modding, guys. I'll speak with you guys in the next video. Take care.